From the KSL Broadcast House, this is Sunday Edition with Doug
We
Wright.
understand some things in Utah. Things about how we can go on the offensive and make a difference in the lives of individual Americans.
I feel great. I feel good. What I'm impressed with right now is American people across the board. We're talking to each other. Doesn't matter what side of the aisle we're on. We're sharing the same misery, and we don't want to do that anymore. So we're seeing it in this remarkable wave of Republicans across the country.
People are frightened. They're terrified of where we are going as a nation right now. They're hoping Republicans will change that, and I am as well.
Boy, Election Day, it has come and gone, and from the Senate to the House, Utah Republicans have won their races to keep their seats. But with votes still being counted across the country, control of the U.S. House and the Senate still hangs in the balance, and even in Utah, many votes are still being processed at Salt Lake County, leaving a handful of state races yet to be decided. So today we'll take a look at all of those races, the ballots that are still being processed, and voter turnout with County Clerk Sherrie Swensen. But first, we have our Boyd Matheson, the host of Inside Sources. He's here to look back at the midterm election. And Boyd, I've been looking forward to our conversation. You have, inside sources. You really do have them, and you have worked on the inside. I think this major race that we just had that had national attention in the state of Utah, you served for a point as the chief of staff for Senator Lee, and I've seen you over many years, working behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, and everything else. So I'm very interested in your thoughts on the race. Let me ask some specific questions. This is being touted. In any other state, a 15-point spread would be a landslide. Yeah. But in Utah, that is a huge margin in a state where we have rarely seen a real competitive race, and competitive becomes relative, but by Utah standards, how significant was the Senate race here in the state of Utah?
Well, I think there were some significant things. It was the top of the ballot race because we didn't have a gubernatorial race or a presidential going on. So these ones are always interesting to look at. I think one of the best indicators in terms of how things played out was who didn't show up. And you're looking at about 45% of registered voters voted. But when you look at eligible voters, only about a third. And I think what happened is it was a result of campaigns across the spectrum that were not talking to the voters. They were yelling at each other. They were either focused on their own personality and performative politics or screaming at the other side that they were the evil, awful, terrible ones, all of the outside money that we've seen. And so I don't think voters were sitting at home saying, they're talking to me about issues that I care about. And so I think many disengaged.
The money that's being spent, and especially now when it comes to a Senate race, it's not like Congress. The Senate all counts equally. The famous thing with Harry Truman when he flew over Nevada once, his staff said, we're flying over Nevada, Mr. President. He goes, boy, what a waste of 2 Senate votes. Yeah. That was a long time ago. Don't hold that against Harry. But all of the Senate seats, they are significant. So every state has equal power in the Senate. And so when it comes to this particular race and how we stand in the state of Utah and nationwide, we see so much money come from the outside, especially in the Senate races. We saw it with Senator Hatch. We've seen it before. But this, hearing dollar amounts, $30 million plus. Yeah,
and that's a big amount for the state of Utah. But just to give it some national perspective, the Pennsylvania Senate race, 320 million. Pennsylvania was 275. Georgia was well over $200 million, and there'll be another 180 million pumped into the state of Georgia during this runoff election in just 4 weeks. And so that amount of money, again, most of that's coming from the outside. And one of the interesting things that it shows me is that putting things out is not communication. And a lot of voters are just tuning all of that out. And I think that's an important thing. I think we saw that here in the state of Utah. Again, that those low turnout numbers are a result that while there were $32 million of ads and things airing on TVs and radios and online, they weren't communicating with voters. They weren't connecting with the issues that really mattered. And so a lot of folks tuned out and didn't show up.
You more than me, but I've been around the country too, and I've seen all of these. And, the nastiness factor, this was really nasty. What we saw between Burgess Owens and Ben McAdams, that was nasty. We've seen some fairly nasty stuff. but we're still kind of in the minor leagues looking at the major leagues compared to what you see around the country.
Yeah, no question. And one of the interesting things is this is going to be, if any kind of movement, I know you've been talking dignity index, and I think that's such an important beginning of a conversation because it's not going to change from Washington, D.C. Politics is broken. But America is not. And we have to recognize that it's going to be community and culture that lead, not the politicians. And it's always been that way in our country. It's community and culture. And so if we want different as voters, we have to expect different. We have to hold people accountable different than we have in the past and really start listening different to those kinds of ads.
Yeah.
What are they? We know what they're against.
Sure.
We know
But
they're
what
against
are
the
they
other party.
for?
What are they for? And I think that was something that was absent in a lot of races here in the state of Utah, not just the Senate race. There was a real absence of issues and a vision of this is what I'm for. But we heard everything over and over ad nauseum. This is what I'm against.
Right. The dignity index, really quickly, and we'll be talking more about that obviously in the future. But are the candidates listening, in your opinion? Are they paying attention to the dignity index?
I think it's caught everyone's attention, and I think the dignity index is not the end of a conversation, just the end of the beginning of a conversation. And as we start to reflect that individually, I know personally with the dignity index, I am checking myself often through the day, not just politically, but when I'm talking with a colleague at work, when I'm talking with a neighbor dealing with a problem, or I'm online doing my own social media stuff, I'm starting to ask myself questions. Wait a minute, where am I on the dignity index? Am I treating this person with respect and dignity or with contempt because they disagree with me?
In the last minute that we have, we still, nationwide, are wondering. We think we know where the House is going. Where is the Senate going to go, especially with Georgia? And I'm asking you to break out the crystal ball and the big robe and the turban and everything on this one, but what are you reading in the tea leaves?
So I think we'll see as we get through this weekend, we get through Sunday and into Monday, I think we'll see that the Arizona Senate race will go to Senator Kelly, so that will be a hold for the Democrats. I think Adam Laxalt in Nevada will actually pull that one out by an incredibly narrow margin, so that will put us at that 50-49, and then all eyes turn to the state of Georgia. And as I said, we should all pray for the people of the state of Georgia. They're going to have 4 more weeks of brutal ads coming at about $180 million they're projecting will be spent. Very little of it on vision, principle, and policy, a whole lot of politics.
When even the car dealers can't buy time.
That's right.
This is serious.
They can't
Boyd,
even show the shows.
That's right. That's right. The shows are interrupted. Boyd, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, Inside Sources on KSL Radio. We'll be right back with Salt Lake County Clerk Sherrie Swensen, so stay with us. Welcome back to Sunday Edition. Several state races remain too close to call still, and many ballots being processed at the end of last week. And joining me now to talk about voter turnout in general, and specifically Salt Lake County, how this midterms election affected us all, Salt Lake County Clerk Sherrie Swensen. And I was mentioning to you, Sherrie, and I want to make sure we have time for this. You and I have talked about so many elections. I can't imagine an election without you. So we're honored to have you on the program today, and what an amazing career you have had. You were telling me off the air how many elections you have actually overseen in Salt Lake County. How many is that? What's that number again?
I figure 67 elections, almost 32 years.
Oh my goodness, 67 elections. And we were kind of going, okay, or at least I was in my mind, how could that happen? But you think of all of the off-year mayoral elections, the special elections that we have had. Many things have transpired in those 32 years. As you look back on this race, however, the midterm election of 2022, how did it go for, I know you can't speak for the state in general, but for Salt Lake County, overall, compared to other years, how did it go?
Well, it went okay, except that we got a lot of ballots dropped on the day before Election Day and on Election Day. We figure 99,000 on Election Day and about 50,000 the day before. So it was interesting. Things started off pretty slowly, and then all of a sudden people got enthused, which is good. But we're now working weekends, long hours, trying to get all of these ballots processed, because with the vote by mail system, it's very tedious. We have to remove the little tab on each envelope that covers the signature. We have to do signature verification on each ballot affidavit to make sure it matches the signature on the voter's record. We have to then remove the folded ballot in the security sleeve from the return envelope, and then that ballot has to be removed from the security sleeve and then flattened out and get ready to be scanned. And so it's a very labor-intensive process, and it really hit us hard at the last thing.
When do you think we'll have the final numbers for Salt Lake County?
Well, ballots are still able to come in if they're timely postmarked from afar. They usually sometimes come from overseas military voters, and they can arrive up until noon on the day of the Board of Canvassers meeting, which is November 22nd, and that's when the election is certified. So also voters who have an issue with their signature being matched to that on their affidavit receive a cure letter, and they have until the day before the Board of Canvassers meeting on November 21st at 5 p.m. to get those cure letters back to us. So we have a lot of work to do, and that's always the case in that 2-week canvassing period. But everything will be certified on November 22nd when the Board of Canvassers meet.
There's a big difference between an election being called and an election being certified. And in Salt Lake County, well, what are some of the closer races? And are there any that are still kind of keeping you up at night going, whoa, we got to get this one taken care of?
There's one that's kind of close, and that's House District 27. That one out of the House District races are that's the closest with the number of ballots to count. It's 160 votes difference as of our report last night. But again, we don't know how many of those ballots that haven't been processed will pertain to that one. There was a Salt Lake City School Board race that was very close until we released last night, and that spread widened a little bit. So we've always said that it's never over until we have all the ballots that are eligible counted.
Right, right. I have to ask this question. This will be a final question. Without judging which system is better, which is the easiest for a county clerk and those that you employ? Is it the older systems that we used to use or this one?
You know, honestly, the vote by mail system is a lot of work on the back end, and we don't get the results out as early. But when I think back about the days of traditional polling places and people had to go to an assigned place and they used to have to know which place that was, we had to hire thousands of poll workers months in advance, train them. We had 300 traditional polling locations, and we had to prepare about 3,000 voting machines. And so on the front end, that work was just tremendous. And so I would not want to see us go back to that. As far as a county clerk, that work perspective, or for the voters and the convenience they have now with vote by mail and generic polling places, both early and election day.
Sherrie, thank you for joining us here on Sunday Edition. Thank you for the 32 years, and thank you for all of the times that you have accepted my phone call on radio and here on TV now. And we wish you good luck in the future.
Thank you.
Sherrie Swensen with us, the Salt Lake County Clerk. And when we come back, the Dignity Index has scored candidate victory and concession messages, and we'll take a look at those. That's coming up next here on Sunday Edition. Now that the election is over, the Dignity Index has released its final set of election-related scores, this time rating candidate victory and concession messages. Those messages from the candidates are scored from 1 to 8, 1 again being a high level of contempt, 8 being the high level of dignity. And here to talk about the messages again with us, Tammy Pfeiffer and Jesse Graham, and we have really appreciated you joining us each week on Sunday Edition.
Thanks for having us.
So maybe just a before we go to some of the actual comments, just overall, what effect do you think the index has had on this race? Are people really up to speed? And maybe I'll go with you first,
You
Tammy.
know, I think the effect that the index has had has been more on people watching the race. Those of us that are watching the commercials, I've had numerous people comment. One friend of mine, this woman said, I am never going to watch a campaign ad the same again.
Yeah.
She said, I walked through the scale. I can't see things the same anymore. I see it with the lens of contempt and dignity, which is really the conversation that we wanted to start.
Right. Jesse, how about you?
Yeah, I have had the exact same experience of noticing contempt in my own speech. If I'm talking to my kids or if I'm talking about politics with other people. And so it's really opened my eyes. And that's kind of what we're hoping will happen with other people too.
Interesting. Let's go to some of the messages, and then I have some follow-up questions too that I'd like to ask. So this first one comes from Senator Mike Lee's victory speech on election night. It is one of two messages that were scored. Both received a 4 on the Dignity Index scale. So let's take a look at this one first.
Utah has spoken loudly and clearly. The policies of the Democratic Party have failed us. They've failed us to the point that red states are having none of it. And tonight, blue states don't want much of it either. Purple states are saying no to it, and I look forward to 2024 when even the blue states are going to be saying heck no. And that's strong language in Utah.
Senator Lee's challenger, Evan McMullen's concession speech Tuesday night received a score of 4 and a 6 at one point, and let's listen to that message.
Tonight's results are proof of the power of unity. Although our coalition did not prevail, we've done something here in Utah that hasn't been done in 50 years. We rejected the politics of division and extremism, and we united. Unity is what made this election the most competitive in nearly a half a century. Thank you. Now, some see our unity as a threat. An anti-democracy movement in America has tried to break the bonds we've built. They've tried to fracture this coalition because they know that our patriotic mission to bring people together is a threat to their power. We cannot allow their attacks to break us, and I know we won't.
Let's take a look at these two comments that happened on election night itself. And Jesse, when your individuals who really analyze this and apply all of the measurements to it, what were they looking for? What did they actually hear?
Yeah, so we have coders working in teams. Each team has someone on the political left and on the political right working together. And so some of the teams actually chose the passages that would be scored, and then others did the scoring. Both of these passages got a 4, which is kind of the start of contempt. It's interesting because in McMullen's example, he's talking a lot about unity and liberals and conservatives working together, but he's still making an us versus them when he's talking about the anti-democratic other side. And so even though he's talking about unity, he's still pretty clearly saying we're better than them, they're bad.
And at one point, though, somebody hit a 6, right?
Yeah. One of McMullen's other passages did hit a 6, where he really was talking about working with the other side.
Tammy, just a quick thought on these two.
Well, again, the 4 is just the very first level that gets down into the contempt side, and it's one of the defining features is the 4 is that the other side is reckless and irresponsible.
Right.
And so that's what gets you then to the us versus them. You're reckless, I'm not.
There were other messages, of course, that were scored by the Dignity Index and from Utah representatives on Twitter and other outlets, and let's take a look at some of them. Representative Blake Moore saying this in a statement made on November 8th. I will continue to put productivity over partisanship to support Hill Air Force Base, promote thoughtful stewardship of our public lands, and reverse Washington's debt culture. My team and I are looking forward to building on our successes and fighting for Utahns in the 118th Congress. Now, this scored 5 on the Dignity Index, and maybe we can quickly talk about why.
Yeah, I think the main reason it was scored a 5 is because there was just a lack of contempt. He's really talking about his own policies, his own agenda, and he's not going out of his way. It's not a 7 on the scale. He's not saying, I'm really looking forward to working with the other side or anything like that. But there is a lack of contempt, and so we like to highlight that by giving that a 5.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Very much.
Okay.
Very much so.
Let's go to Representative Burgess Owens, winning re-election against Darlene McDonald. Here's a message from Owens during a Fox 13 interview. He said, I'm feeling really good. I'm excited to see what is happening tonight, that the country is really waking up. I think the power of what's happened in the last couple of years is really getting people to talk together across aisles and coming to the same conclusion. We need to give the Republican Party a chance to restore what I'm going to say is back to normal. Well, let's talk about that, and then we'll go to Darlene's comments.
Yeah, that one was scored a 4 because again, it's us versus them. We need to wake up from this dream state that we've been living under the Biden administration. The comment that we're going to get back to normal is pretty clearly intimating that what's been going on is not normal, and it's kind of blaming the other side.
Yeah, Tammy, your thoughts on this one?
Well, when the first time I saw this that night, it's like, oh, I think he's talking about unity, but then when you take a closer look, it's like, no, it's still pretty much us versus them. We're better than you are, and thank goodness we're getting back to the better team in charge.
Let's take a look at a couple of other comments. Owens' challenger, Darlene McDonald, made this statement to the Daily Universe. We have voter apathy, where too many people believe their vote doesn't matter, but it absolutely does. Do not believe people who tell you your vote doesn't matter. Be a voter, envision the world you want for yourself, and make that happen. And again, just very quickly, let's take a look at this. Tammy, maybe you could go first.
This one, this scored a 5, and she had a clear statement of her values. She called people to action, but was not blaming the other side.
And Jesse?
Yeah, I think that's right. There was no contempt for the other side. There wasn't a lot of positive things said about the other side, but it was a pretty clear statement of her goals and her values.
We only have 30 seconds left, and I'm curious about the future of the index. We talked about this at the very beginning. This was kind of a trial run. What did we learn, and where is this going to go? And I've left you very little time to talk about it. Let's go to Jesse first.
It's been a really great process just to see people on the left and right being able to come together and come to consensus on doing this score. And I'll let Tammy talk about the future of the project.
We've had a lot of groups contact us, business organizations, corporations, family-oriented organizations saying, I want to be more involved. I want to adopt this for my company or my culture. How can I learn more about it? So we're developing more materials to put out with the index itself and refining the index.
Yeah, a little tweaking here and there and a few things like that.
Yep.
And boy, I have to tell you, I'm very interested to see how the Dignity Index affects and scores the upcoming 2024 national election and state election as well. It's been really great to have you guys on board with us. Thank you for walking us through.
Thanks for the conversations, Doug.
The Dignity Index. And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Sunday Edition. We hope you'll join us again next week. And music and the spoken word, that's coming up next.